for leading this critical oversight hearing, and I want to thank Chairman Mast for his leadership, continuing to hold the Biden administration's feet to the fire on one of the biggest strategic failures in American history. I also want to thank the Gold Star families that are here, thank them for their unprecedented sacrifice to our country. I am confident that looking at my fellow veterans and leaders on this dais, we will finally get the record straight. I also want to thank our witnesses for their selfless service to our nation and the people of Afghanistan. We will continue to look to your bravery and your grace under pressure for inspiration in the decades to come. I find it tragic that the other side keeps going back to the previous administration when we know that during that administration the Taliban did not gain massive ground because they know he'd have bombed them into oblivion. When the circumstances changed massively on the ground and the military commander said exfil from Bagram, Biden told Milley no. It's that simple. And mistakes made throughout the 20 years of our time in Afghanistan do not justify stupidity in the end. They just don't. Any other wrong doesn't make a right. As I did during the full committee Foreign Affairs hearing in March, I want to say a word to my fellow Afghanistan veterans. Our service and our sacrifices were not in vain. Despite the strategic mistakes made in Washington, we kept America safe from a major terrorist attack for over 20 years. No one who served, and like myself lost friends, should ever allow these mistakes we are addressing today to detract in any way from those sacrifices. We protected America for 20 years. Please know accountability is coming. My own combat deployment in Afghanistan illustrated to me the importance of teamwork and dedication to the mission at hand, particularly when it comes to planning. In Afghanistan, we always had our fellow soldiers back, no matter what it took and no matter the personal costs. We took care of our own, including our Afghan brothers in arms, because our mission to keep Afghanistan free and America safe required it. In one of the darkest hours of American foreign policy, you all stood in the breach to save the lives of vulnerable American citizens and our Afghan allies from the vicious Taliban. You didn't let the mission down, even when the politicians did. You were left without proper direction or support from your commander-in-chief, but you didn't let that deter you. You all stood up and have continued to do so in a way that our State Department has been unable or unwilling to do so. For 2 weeks in August of 2021, we basically had no State Department in Afghanistan. Our active duty service members and our veterans did the essential security and humanitarian work on the ground, proving once again that America's greatest resource in any challenge is our men and women in arms. You all are a testament to the critical fact we have learned about the United States military and our veterans throughout the global war on terror, that even when Washington fails you, you rise to every occasion. America thanks you for your dedication, courage, and hearts of service to your fellow man. Sergeant Major Smith, Command Sergeant Major Smith, you testified that after Bagram's closure, only one single infantry company, 113 U.S. soldiers, and 2 companies of partner forces was left in Afghanistan to protect HKIA. Can you give us the detail on how complicated this is, and do you feel that number of troops was sufficient, and why not?
Sir, with the Turkish forces, I need to preface with their involvement in this. They manned one gate. That was their area of responsibility. It was the remaining 113 from that company that was responsible for the rest of that airfield. That includes manning all the gates and ECPs. That includes manning all the towers and all the guard positions. It was an exceptionally hard task, and there should have been more people there.
We know that General Milley asked for more and was turned down. I have a question now for, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Colonel Kumrick, is that correct? Can you explain why you were incredulous to hear senior officials express surprise at the swiftness of the Afghan government's collapse and the Taliban takeover?
I think there's two aspects to this. The first was the underestimation of the Taliban's capability. Over the last 20 years, we saw them in 2001, that initial Taliban force was not very proficient compared to what I saw, say, 10 years later, standing next to a bed in Walter Reed with a friend of mine who was a team sergeant that got caught in a green-on-blue attack. And he described to me the 1,000-meter accurate firefights they were having with machine guns with the Taliban. The Taliban were getting much more lethal, and it was only going to continue to rise. They were improving, and they were getting the logistics they needed, the training they needed. They were a real threat that was on the rise. Meanwhile, on the Afghan government side, and I think it was crystallized eloquently by Colonel Kalenda, the Afghan government had a kleptocracy, had an issue all the way through that is preventing them from being able to achieve what they needed to achieve. So you had this very strong Taliban that was always going to be a threat, and to your point, they were stuck in those 78 districts that were frankly pushed way out to the hinterland. They weren't important areas. But once we telegraphed that we were going to leave and the pressure was then put on the Afghan military, it was clear that that increasingly lethal Taliban were going to have a serious effect. We left immediately, absolutely spinning empty chair when our Afghan allies were looking around, where did we go, when the red storm was coming at them from the Taliban. And at that point, disaster followed.
I apologize. I can't stay for the remainder of this committee hearing, and I'm over my time. I'm the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security, and I'm going to a classified briefing on the 14,000 Chinese nationals who've poured across our southern border, many with ties to the PLA, another tragic failure of this administration. So I must leave, but thank you for your service to this country.